welcome back to Inspector Toolbelt Talk, everyone. Today on, we have the Swede himself, David. How are you?
Doing great, Ian, and thanks for wearing a matching shirt like I asked you to.
Oh, are we wearing matching shirts? Nice.
I don't know, it's some kind of green tone, right?
Yeah, this will be our new ITB uniform. Or me and you could just dress the same for the fun of it, like when twins go out and they, like the double mint twins. No?
Yeah. You have to shave your
See,
head first.
see, things are getting weird already. So, and I'd have to grow like 9 more inches. You got almost a foot on me. So, we're going to talk today about relationships, not awkward ones like me and you have. But we're going to talk about relationships because we've heard that before. This is a relationship business. And I've always thought that was really diminutive of what relationship building is all about. And I've even had other inspectors ask me, they're like, what do you mean by relationship business? It's just really diminutive. That's like saying the law business is just about laws. It's like, okay, what laws? How do you use them? What aspects can you utilize in one way versus another? So we're gonna talk about this a little bit today. And I picked you for this podcast, David, on purpose. I don't know if you know that.
Now, I thought you were
So
just desperate.
no, not desperate. I wanted you specifically for this because me and you are polar opposites when it comes to this. There are two types of relationships, and we're gonna really drill down into this because from a marketing standpoint, I love psychology. I've mentioned that on other podcasts because the more you understand psychology and why we do things, the better we can market. It's like understanding dog training, understanding your dog. The better you understand why they do things, the better you can train them. The better we can market by understanding ourselves and others. So there's two types of relationships that we actually use in business. There's multiple subtypes, which we might touch on a little bit, but we're going to go just down the route of two things. So you have relationship up at the top of the chart, and it's split into two different roads: parasocial relationships and social relationships, which for the sake of this podcast, we're actually going to call intersocial relationships. Just a little bit of fine tuning there to kind of differentiate a little bit. Both of these relationships are very important, but we oftentimes get them very much confused. So here's my point. I am very good at parasocial relationships. Intersocial relationships, I'm not so great at. I'm super awkward at a party, man. I'm just going to stand off in the corner, but like, okay, I'm going to weirdly dance, stare at this picture and this plant. I'll play with the leaves on the plant. You are probably just the opposite. You're very good at intersocial relationships. And you've told me before that you feel awkward with the parasocial type of relationships. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, you could say that, even though I do have a hard time at parties too. It depends. It depends, actually. I gotta be, like, specify that. So, if it's a party with people I know, it works out pretty well for me. But if I have a large group of people that I don't know, most of them, I like to, kind of gravitate towards the ones I know better and talk to them. I'm not good at getting to know new people, I guess, that way.
Well, okay. I disagree with that because I think you have a very wide circle of friends and you get along with people, and you are our most looked at picture on Google Business, and I've mentioned this before because our
People like to
client,
look at me. I mean,
yeah, of course,
who can blame them?
Come on, but no, it's people like you. Our people who use our app, everybody was support. Oh, David was awesome. Just this morning, I was talking to a user, and he's just like, "Oh my goodness, David is awesome," because you're good at those intersocial relationships. But the reason being that we're talking about this is because we need to understand both of these relationship types and how they apply to our home inspection business, because both of them are critical, but invariably, a home inspector will do one and not enough of the other or any of the other. And I've always seen it go lopsided. I'm going to tell you the tale of two inspectors. One was an inspector who, this guy I know, both of them I know, but he was a very good intersocial marketer. He built relationships by intersocial is interacting with other people and building a two-way relationship. This is oftentimes the one that we think of the most. He would go to all these events. He would meet people, greet people. They would instantly like him. And he was really great at those relationships. But he could not get his business to $1 million. And that was his goal. He would always talk about that. I got to get my business to $1 million, which that's a whole different podcast. I didn't agree with it. Getting your business to a number, but making less is weird to me. But he couldn't get there because he was only doing one side of the relationship building, the intersocial. He had almost no social media presence, and he had a single web page for his website, and half the time his website wasn't working. So he was missing a key component. Then I know guys who do a parasocial relationship. Now, a parasocial relationship, which we've talked about on this podcast before, is a one-sided relationship. So we, David and I, right now are building a parasocial relationship with you as our listener. If you're driving in your truck, heading to an inspection, whatever, listening to our podcast, we're building a parasocial relationship. We're not interacting, but it builds a relationship because you guys get a view into who we are, how we think. It's the same reason that people love celebrities, but they've never actually met them. So there was another inspector that I know. He was having a hard time, and this was actually a stumbling point for me in my business years ago, because he did everything parasocial. He did all these videos and people loved it and liked it and things like that. But have you ever heard the expression, this is the fallacy of a parasocial relationship, never meet your heroes? Why do you think they say that, David?
Well, for one thing, they're going to disappoint you every single time.
Yep.
It's just you build this perfect persona up in your head. Especially, I mean, it's very easy with actors, artists, because they show their best side. They have a team of both makeup artists. They might not even be posting most likely aren't posting their social media themselves. It's someone doing it for them. So you get this persona.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, I could drop a name here, but too many people will probably hate me for it. She's a very good businesswoman. She's very famous and very popular, but that's not the real person that you're seeing. You're just seeing something that was created.
Yeah. And so what happens is we are on a very personal level meeting people. So if we have only parasocial marketing, like we're really great on our social media, really great on our website, really great with everything, even parasocially, when people call us, we can still have a parasocial relationship. We'll get into the weeds of that. When they meet us, we're setting ourselves up for agents and clients almost having a level of disappointment. Not because we're a bad inspector or anything, but it's like, man, you posted this video, you're finding all these defects, and we walk through their house and we're like, hey, things look pretty good. And they're like, where's all the cool stuff that you usually find in your videos or things like that? So both of those things are not good or bad in of themselves, but they have to cross over for a successful business. So I thought we could go through a little bit of how to build a parasocial relationship with people, but also build intersocial relationships so that we can properly market our business. Now, I actually wrote down, I have it in front of me. I don't write many things down when we do a podcast. I usually like to do my research and get my thoughts together. But when we're looking at parasocial versus intersocial relationships, we want to have a heavier focus on one type of relationship with another, depending on who we're dealing with. A parasocial relationship is what the kind of relationship we want to try to keep a heavy weight on with our clients, with an intersocial relationship with everyone else. So as we think about that, there's a couple reasons why. I've gone the other way sometimes, the intersocial relationship with my clients and the parasocial with like agents as an example. When I have intersocial with my clients, they're calling me all hours of the day. Every time they hire a contractor, they're asking me questions. Who should I hire? This or that, which I'm happy to do, but they feel a level of accessibility with me. But that doesn't mean I want to take away all that intersocial relationship. I want to have some, but it needs to be heavy on the parasocial. Ian did our inspection, and they have this image of me, and they appreciate that. Agents, on the other hand, I'd like to keep at arm's length because I'm just weird. I'm like, oh man, they're gonna ask me to go out and have dinner with them and the other agents, and I'm gonna have to sit there and talk, and I just want to go home and watch Star Trek, you know. But that agents want more of an intersocial relationship. And even the attorneys we work with, mortgage companies, whoever we're marketing to that brings us the client, we still want to have parasocial. We want to have a little bit of distance, but we also want to make sure that agents and people of those type of referral sources have more of an intersocial relationship with us. So I know I keep interjecting these terms back and forth, but I kind of wanted to get into the weeds of this a little bit. So David, help us with building good intersocial relationships. What are your thoughts on that? How can we do that?
Yeah. So I got to tell you all my trade secrets, huh?
I know I want every last one of them.
It's funny though because as you're talking about this, I was thinking a bit about I've done other support too, not just for our app. I've done support, other businesses and things, and it does become a problem with intersocial relationships because you want to give good support. People like you, you help them out with their issues. But the same thing has been preached everywhere you do this, like try to direct them to always go through the official channels because all of them try to go to you personally. And there's a couple of issues with that. One, you could get burnt out. You're trying to help everyone at once. You're trying to be good to everyone, but also the quality of service they get is actually lessened because now if you are gone one day and that email sits in your inbox, even though there's other people available to help them, they're not getting the help they need. So it's something that you have to be careful with because you do want to be nice, approachable. You want to be helpful, and that kind of builds that trust in you. But at the same time, you want to make sure that they know that you're not the only person running this business. And as a home inspector, that might mean that you do have your support team. You might have a call center that you're using. You might have other inspectors on the team. So kind of making sure that that relationship gets widened out, not just you, but it's a family affair. I don't know if that kind of brought us off topic a bit, but
it did, but that's okay. It's a good point to remember, and especially as for those of us who are single inspectors. That's when I always found it the hardest to keep the intersocial and the parasocial relationships separate. When I hired a call center, that's when I realized that I was intersocial too much with my clients. Because once they had to call a call center, 90% of those calls never made it to me. It was a simple question that the call center could answer, or they're like, oh, okay, never mind. I don't want to bother them. And then it creates a level of distance. But we still want to be approachable. There's a buddy of mine. Everybody comes to him with his problems. And he was actually ironically going to somebody else saying, everybody comes to me with their problems. And he goes, the problem is you're not approachable. He's like, what do you mean I'm approachable? He goes, no, you're not approachable. You're inviting. There's a big difference. We want to be approachable with our clients, but not so inviting that they feel that they have access to us. I've had home inspectors talk about clients coming to their home. Client came, knocked on their door, and was just like, hey, I had some questions. We really got the balance of parasocial with intersocial way off there.
Hey, you inspected my home. Now I want to inspect yours.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to show you how it feels. But I guess if I had to summarize how, because it gets complicated and it gets fuzzy, if I had to summarize how I work it, is agents get my cell, clients get the business line. The difference is if an agent or somebody calling me, hey Ian, we've built an intersocial relationship. I've referred 100 clients to you the past few years here. I'm only going to call you when something's happening and we're working together to take care of this client. Oh, okay. They have my cell number for that. That's an intersocial relationship with a bit of parasocial. But now my client, who's used me once, has random questions about the report 3 months later on page 37, subsection B. It's like they don't get my sell. So building those intersocial relationships are oftentimes what we focus on. So let's talk about relationship building there. Especially if we're just starting off, or if we're like, oh man, I wish I could get more business. We tend to focus on parasocial too much. And then sometimes we focus on intersocial too much. The guys who focus on parasocial too much, I had a inspector who called me about a month ago, and if he listens, I don't know. This is actually more than one person talks about this with me because I had this conversation a lot. But I just remember this one guy. He was like, I want to build my business. I'm like, cool. Let's talk about relationship building. Let's talk about what we're doing parasocially, intersocially. And he goes, okay. I posted on my Facebook page last month. Nobody looked at it. I'm like, okay, how many offices did you visit? I don't go to offices anymore. I went to some and there was nobody there. I'm like, so you first of all, he's just trying things once and not going anywhere. So then he started doing more social media marketing. Because let's be honest, it's easy to throw up a video once a week and say, hey, everybody, here's a TPR valve. Look at this little lever. If you lift on it, hot water comes out this pipe. That didn't really build a parasocial relationship with me, anyways. We'll talk about that in a minute. But he was skipping what was actually hard, which are the intersocial relationships. We all love to. I mean, listen, you're going to have guys like Preston Kincaid or AJ or others who are just like killing it out there in social media, but those guys are not doing that on their own. They're building both types of relationships. But for the average guy like us, are we going to become internet famous? No. So we need to have the intersocial relationships, and that comes from meeting and greeting, shaking hands, and kissing babies.
Yeah, not too many babies, so
No,
then you
and ask
become a
permission
politician.
first, because yeah, that gets weird if you start kissing babies and run away. You're like, ah,
yeah. Not even my baby, just a client in my office. But yeah, I think part of the problem, I think, is that people don't listen enough to each other.
Yeah,
And that's a big part of the whole intersocial relationship. Everybody wants to say what they have to think, but they don't want to listen to what someone else has to say. And the thing is, it's not just about letting them talk for a long period of time, because if you don't pay attention to what they say, they're gonna know it. It doesn't take long before they're like, yeah, he doesn't care at all what I say. He just gives me a little time slot to talk, and then he takes over. So
wait,
that is something that is the basis of building a relationship there.
What did you say?
You know what? I'm done. I'm turning my camera off right now. Boom. All right.
No, I'm just teasing.
Do that quickly.
I'm just teasing you. But that you hit the nail on the head. We worry too much about what we're going to say, when really people just want to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a difficult client recently, and so I called them, and they just went off, up one side of me, down the other, and I listened, and I would repeat back sections of what they said, and I would try to empathize with them. I know how that feels. I've had an experience like that, but I'm not saying I understand you completely with how you feel, but I think I'm getting it. And you know, at the end of it, it wasn't resolved. It wasn't really an issue. It just wasn't resolved. But they love me because you just let them listen. And there was a relative of mine who used to say, if you get people talking about themselves and expressing themselves, you've just made a friend. People will tell me, oh man, I had the best conversation with Ian. And I'm like, I didn't say anything. I was just, it was a very one-sided conversation. But that is key. I really think you hit it on the head there, David.
Yeah.
Is that
and it's hard
listening.
too, because
See, you weren't listening.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes it's easy to get into the rut of, okay, what am I going to say next? Especially like if it's not a natural setting, like you mentioned, a real estate agent. you might be a bit nervous. So you're thinking, okay, what am I going to say next? And focusing too much on what you're going to say next is making you tune out what they are saying right now. So
Hmm.
what you're saying next is not going to make any sense in the conversation.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. We should just let it happen naturally, and if we're awkward, embrace the awkwardness. Do you know how many other awkward agents that I've met I still work with them, and I've even had people say stuff along those lines, kind of like, "I'm glad I met somebody like me." It's like sometimes half the people sitting around with us are worried about what they're going to say next, and so it's just embrace the awkwardness. So a lot of this comes down to going outside of our comfort zone. Parasocial is on the surface, anyways, easier. That's what people think. And that's why we get out there and we sit in our underwear at our desk and start sending out emails, sending out mass text messages, sending out social media videos and posts and friending people and all this other stuff. Because let's be honest, that takes very little emotional effort.
Just for the
Uh,
record, I do have pants on.
that's good. Yeah, no comment on my end. No, I'm just kidding. Um, but there was a successful inspector that I was just talking to. He says he is emotionally drained at the end of the day. But he goes, I tell you what, it builds a great business. So it's kind of like shoveling a ditch. If you shovel harder, you're going to get the better ditch. You're going to get farther than everybody else. Are you going to be a little more tired at the end of the day? Yeah. So let's dig. Here's some quick recommendations. Some of them you've probably thought of if you're listening, and some of them you've probably not thought of, and some of them you've probably thought of but really didn't want to do. The staples are going to be open houses and office visits. I don't care if the agents are not there. That's the biggest excuse that I hear. Agents aren't there. They're there eventually. Um, I can name dozens of companies that I've helped build and helped guys build rather recently over the past year or two that office visits, one of their primary ways of marketing. Open houses, office visits. Another thing is go to all of these events. Are they going to charge you to go into your local MLS event? Yes. You know where you should be? Right there. With your uniform on, nicely dressed, clean cut, or beard trimmed if you have one, hair done, cleaned up not right after an inspection.
If you
Go to
have it.
those. If you have it, if you have the hair, do up your hair. We should be at those. Do we need a booth every time? No. But can you grab a cocktail or non-alcoholic cocktail, whatever you prefer, and start mingling? Awkwardly stand there. Whatever it is. Go out to lunch with agents. We've talked about that before. Here's something that you might not have thought about before. When was the last time that we as a home inspection company put on a small event? So, could we do a taco boat ride? You rent a boat. Those boats with people on it, they're like $800-900 depending on what part of the country you're in. I mean, if you're in Southern California, if it's anything like the real estate market is $10 million, I don't know. You get one of those booze cruise things, but you just do tacos instead.
You know,
Cool.
when
You
you said taco boat ride, image that came into my head was a hard shell taco riding on the river.
that sounds amazing. Just
No,
hope
it
it's not
won't be.
soft shell.
It gets soggy.
Yeah.
No.
But even on a smaller scale, can we do an office dinner? Contact a broker. I used to do these, and I cold call. And I remember one time I did an educational event, and they're like, "We don't want any food." I'm like, "I'm bringing food." I'm like, "No, no, 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 it's okay. Everybody got their own lunch." I'm like, "Cool, then I'll just get it for them." Did I spend an extra 200, $300? Heck yeah. Do agents from that event still refer us 11, 12 years later? Yes. So it's immeasurable. So let's say we don't have the money. Let's say we're just starting out. We're like, Ian, I got $10 here that my wife lent me to go and start my inspection business. You know what's super cheap? Coffee. Can we go and get a cup of coffee with agents? Can we go and even just invite an office out? Say, hey, I'm going to be at the Daily Grind or whatever coffee place is near us. And you guys want to stop by and I'll buy you all a cup of coffee? Whatever it takes Building those relationships is important. Once we're there, I mean, it really just comes down to, like you said, listening, right? We can sit there awkwardly. Somebody gets their free cup of coffee and walks out. Okay, but we built a relationship. So, what are some other ways that you think it's important to build the intersocial relationship? We're getting to the parasocial part.
Yeah. Another thing to think about too is that it's not all business, because that
Yes.
is definitely going to cut it down to a different relationship. If all you talk about is business with them, they're going to be like, well, that's pretty boring. I want to talk
Mm-hmm.
about something more interesting. So it might be tricky finding out, things that interest them, through conversation, of course. Find, you know, it could be that we have similar interests, but if not, just showing interest in their interest can actually be a starting point, just to get conversations going, and you know, laughing together is always a good relationship builder. So find
Mm-hmm.
something funny to talk about.
Yeah, and we have to make sure that we keep our humor on par with theirs. If we're taking out a group of 75-year-old brokers and we're cracking dirty jokes, they're probably not going to appreciate that. If it's a bunch of young women and, we're kind of joking and looking a little creepy and we're a guy, that's probably not going to go over well. I would definitely be cautious about that, but find some humor. But where I think you really hit the nail on the head is common ground. Any salesman will tell you to find common ground. What they don't tell you is, was it Socrates who said this? Know thyself? Was that Socrates or Plato? I don't know. But know
Kirk.
thyself. What? Yeah, I don't
Kirk.
know. Captain Kirk, know thyself. Write down a list of all of our interests. If we have a short list, maybe become more interesting. I don't know. But but like anything, like sci-fi. Okay, cool. I'm into sci-fi. Here's my five favorite shows. Do you like golf? I hate golf, by the way. Oh my goodness, I can never get into golf. Skiing. Anything. Write down anything that we like to do and get really granular with it. And the reason I tell you to do that is I see so many missed opportunities. Because now we're talking to a guy, an agent or an attorney or a mortgage broker, whoever, that we want them to refer us work. But we have no common ground. They have no vested interest in us. But now we find out, oh, you like to water ski? I love to water ski. My brother has a boat on Lake George. He does. My brother has a boat on this lake, and I have a boat on the other lake. All of a sudden, you're now part of his email group about boats and jet skiing. Or my favorite is fantasy football. I was terrible at it. I would always just pick the funny names for my team. Do you know how many agents do fantasy football in my area? If you could get on some of those fantasy football teams, or even look, can you do they belong to the same league and say, oh man, Joe Agent, he's in the fantasy football league here. Maybe I'll visit the office or send him a Facebook, not creepily like you're stalking him. Hey, I just saw you on a fantasy football league. I didn't know you were on there. Oh yeah. Now all of a sudden you're on his team in more ways than one. Whatever we're interested in, don't assume that the agents are in a different world, that they don't like to smoke meat and they don't like to play soccer or crochet. Did I ever tell you the time that I was at a Super Bowl party? My wife and I were just married, and there was a lady sitting there, and I'm like, I knew her really well. I'm like, what you doing? She goes, oh, I'm knitting. And the other one goes, I'm crocheting. I'm like, how do you do that? They're like, here, let me show you. And I knitted a scarf during the Super Bowl with these two ladies. It was amazing.
You did pick the simplest possible thing to make.
It's just a straight line. But,
yeah.
we actually laugh about that to this day, almost 20 years later. Common ground never leaves people's minds. They connected a spot in their brain to you from something that they already know. And not just a highfalutin like mental sense, in a literal sense. There's now a connection between you and something they love. That builds relationships.
And now they love you.
So I'm going to give this tip again. Fantasy football. Check that out. Agents around my area, they love it. Matter of fact, groups of agents will get together and do fantasy football. See if that'll work for you. Plus, it's kind of fun. Let's talk parasocial relationships. So when we talk parasocial relationships, we're talking a lot of social media. What are some mistakes that you see guys make with their parasocial relationships, David?
Um, I mean, one pretty obvious is it's not interesting. I mean, here's the thing: like, if you have a home inspection business, okay, of course you're expected to, show defects that you found that are odd, which can be interesting. But if that's all you're posting, that could get old pretty quick. I know for a
Yeah.
fact, you wouldn't follow an account that just basically shows your 20th busted pipe in the basement in a row. Like, yeah, I've seen it before. I need something, more interesting. And the next one is taking yourself too seriously.
Oh yeah,
I think
that's a big one.
the most interesting home inspector social media accounts I've seen, that's the ones that are just doing ridiculous things. Which, same there, it could get old if you do, too much of the same. But a little bit of silliness, just it elevates your your social media quite a bit.
Yeah, I think you hit on a couple of really great points there. One of the things that I notice is that not understanding what message we're presenting. I call it talking at and not with your audience. So there's lots of reasons to post to social media. So for instance, we post to social media because we deliver what people expect, which is, a post about home maintenance or real estate or, the home inspection process. People expect to see that. And it's actually important for SEO as a side point, which we won't get into. But Google looks at what you're posting on, in particular, Facebook, Google My Business, and a couple of others. So you need those kind of posts. We're not telling anybody to stop doing those. We do those. I do them for my own companies. You need those. But if that's all you have, that's not going to get a great response. We're not just posting just for the Google algorithm. So talking at our users is, here's what you need to do to get your house ready for a home inspection. Here's why you should hire us. Here's what you need to do. Here is what I found on an inspection. Here's what I do. There's a separation there. Parasocial creates a connection. We need to turn you and I into we. There's a couple ways we can do that. So the first one is the simplest. Just use the term we. Like we. No, I'm just kidding. That's
That's when you
actually an
fall
old.
off the roof.
Yeah,
It's a
we.
good
I
post
fell off
right
the
there.
roof. That's a great soundbite. That's an old sales trick, and I learned that from a salesman. Oh man, this guy was awesome. One thing I do have to caveat everything with this is we have to be genuine. You can't build parasocial or intersocial relationships without being a genuine human being. This guy was a natural salesman and just a great human being. Like, you just wanted to be around him. He said he never claimed to be a salesman, but he knew every trick in the book. But he's just like, I don't care about tricks. I care about being a genuine human. But he would talk about how if you just change the word from you or I to we, it would actually conjoin people emotionally. So when we're talking in our videos, a simple trick is to say, what are we looking at here today? Instead of saying, what are you looking at? Let me explain. Now we're talking at our audience. But that also works with intersocial relationships. Just interject the word we. In almost every conversation, and when I do large presentations or small presentations, I work very, very hard. It slips out sometimes, but I work very, very hard never to say you or I. Always we. Because now you and the people you're talking with are in the same boat together. And I'll tell you what, it's measurable. Large corporations use it. It's a basic trick. But it's not really a trick because it does the same thing to you. It conjoins you to people you're talking with. Now you're working with them. So that's trick number one. I think what you said about being boring is very true. I would say 95% of the home inspection social media posts I see out there are a big snooze fest. And listen, it still builds a parasocial relationship. A lot of guys, it's better than nothing. And a lot of guys are like, oh, I put 5 videos out, nobody looked at it, only got 15 views. That's not the point. I didn't go meet my wife and drop my 3 best lines on her and then say, oh, she wasn't interested. I kept working that room, man. So, um,
I
just
need to hear
because
those lines.
hey, did it hurt when you fell out of heaven? Um, if anybody actually knows my wife listening to this, they know that didn't work. If anything, that put me behind the starting line. But where was I going with this? Oh, so don't think that just because you put a few videos out there, put a few posts out there, and didn't get a good reaction, keep going. You'll have bad months, bad years, and then it'll jump up again, then drop down. That's social media. But listen, when I go to your website and then I check out your social media and I can see you and I can see you talking, even if you're not doing it perfectly or it's boring, that still builds a parasocial relationship with me, with you. So what we're talking about is refining that. So
Yeah.
Telling a story is more important than showing something cool. And what we're interested in is almost invariably not what anybody else is interested in. I've seen videos where a home inspector's shooting a video, totally boring, but then you start reading the comments and everybody's like, did you see the dog in the background?
Mhm.
You know, and they're just like enthralled with this dog with a rotisserie chicken in the background. Meanwhile, the home inspector's like, here's an electric panel on the exterior of a house without proper protection. And this is just a dog going at a rotisserie.
Yeah.
Tell a story. What do people want to hear? What what is interesting to your client? That's what I would always use as a gauge. Like as I'm walking through and the clients are like, this is so interesting. I'm like, what? It's a generator
Hmm.
panel.
Yeah.
But hey, okay, let's do the video about the generator panel.
Yeah.
You know?
It's really about to knowing your audience. So I think I think that's a common mistake for home inspectors that um, looking at their social media like, oh, I want to sound, like I really know my stuff. I want to sound technical. I want to have like all these facts and details. Uh, but other home inspectors are not who you want to be interested in your social media.
Exactly.
and and it's funny too, as we worked with social media too for a while. We had a period of time when we were doing a lot more funny and entertaining posts,
Mm-hmm.
which some home inspectors love them, but we did get a lot of pushback, from home inspectors. They feel like it needs to be all about home inspections. It can't be anything that's, you know even though it's slightly home inspection related, it's not what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And you know the posts that get people more involved, that's the ones that you want to want to shoot for.
Yeah. I remember we used to do things like even like polls or like funny real estate stories or like that's real estate, that's not home inspection related. Don't put that on my Facebook page. And we find a happy medium, but
Hmm.
if we let the home inspectors choose what we post, it would be highly technical, extremely detailed, long posts that nobody would read. I think I told you this actually this morning. I actually had to, or did I tell somebody else yesterday? Anyways, I had to actually reduce what a home inspector was getting for his website hits and his social media. And I told him ahead of time, I'm like, because he wanted things more technical and heavily detailed. And I said, okay, if we do this, you're going to get less results. He literally said, I'd rather have less results and have this. And I mean, I'm paraphrasing a very long conversation and weeks worth of trying to convince him. And he has less hits on his website, almost no people reading his message on his social media, and it's super dry. And it wasn't like I was posting like, hey, here's some crazy whacked out stuff. It's just nobody wants to read about hydrostatic pressure and, the temper of clay tiles. It's just not what people want to hear. Now, is it great that we know that? Cool. But we want to tell the story. Like, okay, folks, here we're at an inspection. I'm not going to get into all the stuff about hydrostatic pressure, but look at the belly on this wall. So, a Bowden Foundation wall. Okay, now that's cool. You know what make it even better? We don't have to do this if we're a serious kind of guy. That's fine. But if we're a really funny kind of guy and we can get away with it and we have a kind of a gut, put our belly up against that belly.
Who wears it better?
Yeah, who wears it better? Oh my goodness, that would be an amazing post. But also tell a story, and not when we say tell a story. I remember Preston Kincaid said that in one of his posts online. He goes, "Tell a story." All of a sudden, I see all these home inspectors posting them sitting down telling a story. I'm like, that's not what he meant. I'm like, we missed the point.
Well, it's funny, isn't it?
It is. So what we're trying to say is get people involved. What was the circumstance? How did this end up? Show a video clip of this and that. Make it interesting. And if we're not interesting guys, if we're like, I don't know how to make it interesting, just try hard to not make it boring, which means using the we. Don't get overly technically detailed, even if it's about something very technical. Like if we walk up and we want to show something about a boiler, okay, guys, this is a wet boiler with a firebox that actually sits in the water towards the bottom, and there's a crack in the firebox. Get over that. Just say, listen, I could get into all day about a wet unit and the fireboxes, but take a look at this now, and then tell what happened in your inspection. That's way more interesting than going over the technical reasons as to why this boiler was shooting fire out of the firebox into the basement.
I mean, a video of the fire shooting out would be pretty impressive too.
That would be the cool part, but
Yes.
oftentimes we're not showing the cool part.
Uh-huh.
I always like, some of the most viral videos are the silent videos, like a home inspector just sitting there when there's a weird sound happening, like you have a weird animal in the attic, and so you're just sitting in the attic not saying anything, and you hear, like, have you ever heard a skunk scream? They scream like crazy.
No,
They sound like little girls screaming. Anyways, side point. Sitting in the attic, guy just sitting there with his eyes wide, and all he hears is screams. Or like, is there a mannequin up in the attic? Oh, okay, this creepy mannequin staring at me in the attic. That tells a small story. We're not talking about writing a novel. And keep our text to a minimum. A couple of sentences. If you have to say this is a long post at the beginning of your post, nobody's read it. Just except for another home inspector.
That's all they read. This is a long
That's
post.
all they read. This is a long
I'm moving
post.
on.
Scroll. But these are two avenues, and we didn't really get into, like, there's several different types of parasocial relationships, and intersocial relationships have a lot of intricacies to them too. But we should know the difference between the two, and we should have both worked into our marketing campaign. And I say marketing campaign. It is part of our marketing campaign. When we say marketing campaign, I'm not just talking business cards, brochures, and mailers. I'm still not a big fan of mailers personally, unless they're 11th month inspection mailers. But we're talking, what's my schedule for parasocial this week? I have 30 minutes scheduled each day to build a parasocial relationship. That's making a video or two, posting it online, and working the room that way. I have 3 hours a week on Tuesdays and 4 hours on Friday for intersocial relationships. And then plan it out. What are you going to do? Are you going to go visit some real estate offices? Are you going to invite somebody out to dinner, an office or something? Again, if we're low on funds, visiting open houses, all that costs is gas. Fantasy football league, listen, that go look on your fantasy football leagues, or see if there's any agents online that like football on any of these groups in your local area. I can guarantee you about half of them are going to be on a fantasy football league. And like you said, don't talk about work. Stop talking about work. Stop talking about how awesome an inspection we are. Talk about fantasy football. And then they're like, oh, David, you're a home inspector. Cool. One of the guys on my league needs a home inspection. We'll call you next week. So, I don't know. Do you have anything else to add, David?
I do. I would actually need help from our editing team, though. We need to know how many times throughout the years you have said hydrostatic pressure on this show.
That is like the coolest phrase, though. It's like
I
it's
figured
like
you
my
thought
favorite.
that.
Well, it's like my favorite thing to say because it's just like the most. It's the most interesting sounding word you can say that doesn't mean a whole lot. It's just wet dirt weighs more. That's all. Why do we have a word for it? And it just sounds cool.
It's for you.
It is for
That
me.
word was made for you.
Who somebody sent me a message, and I can't remember who it was. Maybe one of our previous guests, like George Karampoulos or something. I can't remember who, but they said, anecdotally, you say hydrostatic pressure too much, making fun of my overuse of the word anecdotally.
Yeah.
I've gotten better.
I need.
We have gotten better.
I never
See,
had a problem.
but I'm including you in my
It's not
parasocial
not
relationship.
working. Not working.
No, all right. All right. Well, I hope this helps. Have a game plan. And remember, these things, we talk about ROI. There's another buzzword that doesn't really mean a whole lot in these circumstances. Stop measuring return on investment by how many inspections you got from meeting people and talking with them. Build relationships, both parasocial and intersocial, and people will love you just as much as they love David.
No,
Well,
it's a
maybe not as
stretch.
much. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Ian.